And we're live.
Here we
Welcome
are.
to it. Here we are. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Studio. Today we're going to talk about cult coaching and the courage to unlearn. Leadership Studio, of course, is the place where I get to have fantastic conversations with leaders and coaches and others on all manner of things that are important. And today I'm talking to my friend and colleague Arjan Makar. Arjan, why don't you introduce yourself? You'll do a better job than I will.
Sure. My name's Arjan Makar. I am a certified coach through the Coactive Training Institute. And I know Todd through the Coactive Institute's leadership program that we did together in 2023.
Oh yeah, we did start in
It's been a
2020.
while. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I coach people around relationships, mostly romantic, but also, pretty much any topic that they bring. I find that relationships are the way to fulfillment in the topic. So,
Mm-hmm.
relationships of all forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I've recently gotten a certification in relational trauma, working
Excellent.
with people who have been in relationships with people who are what I would call a cult of one.
Right. Right. And that's a good segue too, because I've left our title up on the screen, Cults, Coaching, and the Courage to Unlearn. And it's kind of a provocative title, isn't it? Like maybe we should talk a little bit about why this is a conversation that we think needs to happen.
Sure. Do you want to start, or would you like me to?
Actually, well, I would love to start because
Okay.
you brought something up in your introduction, and I'm going to tell a little anecdote. When I first talked about coactive with my with my sister, and I, as you know, there's the fundamentals course, and it was such a moving experience for me that I had consumed so much of it, and I just felt something that I'd never felt before because it created this vulnerability that I rarely allowed myself to have. And I was talking to my sister about it, and she stopped me after about 15 minutes and said, "So Todd, I just want to check, have you joined a cult? Because it kind of sounds like you joined a cult."
Yeah, that's so common too. I will say, I was brainstorming a list of things that people mistake as cult behavior, and enthusiasm is one of them.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So for me, this conversation needed to happen, I think, because there's this feeling of cultishness around sort of a lot of the wellness work that people do, right? Whether it's personal or professional, and the way that I've thought of it, at least in my own experience, is I've had to sort of crack myself open a little bit in order to examine the parts of myself that I had been certain about, because when I'm certain, I can create boundaries and I can believe that they're real because I've created them because I was certain. And so much of this work, coaching and fulfillment, professional fulfillment, and really the kind of leadership that needs to happen has been about cracking that stuff open. And when you crack it open, there's room for exploitation or potential for exploitation. So
Sure.
that's kind of why I think it's important to have this conversation, because people have to know the difference.
Yeah. And the unfortunate / fortunate part of that is, I think when you crack that open, there's also room for nuance and room for more self-authority and more autonomy.
Right.
Yeah.
More self-authority and more autonomy. And that's, listen, more self-authority, more autonomy, more self-acceptance, more self-compassion, like all of those things are like, these are major themes in all coaching.
Sure. Yeah.
And or at least they ought to be.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like when they're not, I guess just like a little personal background for me is that I have been, the new agey chick since I was, pretty young, late teens, and, done all sorts of self-development work. And
Mm-hmm.
looking back on it now, I'm surprised I didn't get like sucked into something that was even more culty, because I was right.
Mm-hmm.
I was cracked open, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, for some reason it didn't go that way with me, but where I did get exploited was in this cult of one, where I was in a narcissistic relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
so the difference between, or the similarities between like being in a narcissistic relationship and being in a cult is coercive control.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, coercive control. So,
Mm-hmm.
and the number one characteristic of coercive control is that your autonomy becomes limited.
Mm-hmm.
Your self-authority becomes limited
Mm-hmm.
because of, how that person or that cult is controlling you.
Mm. So that's really interesting. Like lack of autonomy is a thing to look for, because I think what's starting to come up for me is, you know, as I'm listening to this, if I'm listening to this conversation and I'm considering, coaching or some other wellness journey, right? One of the things to look for in terms of like, is this like, does this pass the sniff test,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is coercive control. So is it okay to ask, what's an example? Like, how would I know? Like, coercive control, autonomy, like these are all sort of, up here things, but like,
Sure.
what's a down on the ground example that I might want to
Yeah.
pay attention to?
Yeah. So great. Let me think of something that's less about a one-on-one relationship and more about like a
Mm-hmm.
cult. I would say, being encouraged to ignore your body or your intuition,
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of these concrete rules,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I think you were referring to, like that certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think black and white thinking. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the research I've done on cults, that, sleep deprivation is huge because it,
Mm-hmm.
wears you down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, black and white thinking. Oh, also like limiting your interactions with people outside the cult or,
Mm-hmm.
your loved ones, or maybe like, even more sneaky and more manipulative would be bad mouthing and trying to highlight the worst qualities of the people you love in
Mm-hmm.
order to drive a wedge between you and them. So
Mm-hmm.
then, it's insidious. It's insidious, and I think it can be really hard to see when it's happening to you. It's often easy for other people to see,
Mm-hmm.
like if we watched a cult documentary right now, all of us, whoever's here, and we'd be like, oh, I can't believe they fell for that, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
think the manipulation is so specific to the
Mm-hmm.
person they're manipulating that it's apparent to other people, and it probably isn't apparent to the person being manipulated.
Well, so what's so interesting to me as you describe this is, like, I think, okay, so there's a cult, like a cult of people, which is, around some concept or some idea or some, often they're faith based, or they claim to be, or something, right? But
Sure.
as you're talking about coercive control and loss of autonomy, and I know that you didn't want to talk about, the relationship of one, but what I'm hearing is a lot of similarities between the things you're describing and what passes as just regular corporate culture.
Oh, yes,
And
absolutely. Yep.
okay, and I was kind of hoping we would get to, because when we pre-gamed this conversation, I said something like that, and you're like, yep. And so and I was kind of hoping that we get to that, because like the example that I'll use for my own life is I have worked in places where I wasn't told explicitly, don't talk about X, Y, or Z, but it was implied that my voice was only for the purpose of the organization or for the company that I was working for, and that my own opinions would be suspect or would be policed in terms of how they aligned to, what it is. So any intellectual property that I was creating, around sort of my discipline at the time, project management or business transformation or whatever, right? would naturally or have to go through the lens of the appropriateness to that organization. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so for me, the way that it showed up was like, I worked in places and I was terrified to post anything on LinkedIn because what if they read it and what would that mean for my career?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which sounds kind of culty in terms of the way that you're describing it, doesn't it? Like,
well, and I think there's a lot of things that are a little bit culty. And yeah, that does sound a little bit culty. And then I think what would take that over the edge to like real cult territory would be, being penalized for not saying it exactly right. Or, there's this like way, I think that a cult leader or the person at the top will use threats and intimidation in order to get people in line rather than inspired leadership. Yeah. And I think that, we're seeing a big swell of this, especially in the United States and even in our government.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And for those who don't know, Arjan, you're joining us from New York. Right. And everyone knows I'm in Canada. So we're binational at this one. And well, it's so interesting that you say that, because I think also I'm all tongue-tied because there's 1,000 things that I want to say. But the thing that's interesting here too, right, is part of our title was the connection to coaching, right? And certainly the coaching that you do and the coaching that I do, is we work with different audiences, but at the same time, a lot of the things that we do is similar. And you even said at the beginning, right? Like we were trained in the same school. And what's interesting is that there's the part of the school that we went to and part of the coaching that I know that you do and the coaching that I do is really about awakening sort of agency and self-authority and self-acceptance rather than suppressing it. And I have experience with coaches who do exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And right, so there is a hey, I'm sort of interested in this thing and what do I look out for? Which isn't to say the only good coaches were the ones that were trained the way that we are. That's not true at all. There's many excellent coaches who were trained differently. But there's a thing to watch out for.
Yeah. I mean, I think a hallmark of a well-trained coach is a coach that knows how to create a space where a person can discover their unique inner resources and see their own strengths. And, as a result of that, have more autonomy, have more self-compassion and self-authority in their life, right? And I think what happens a lot is people enter a coaching relationship and they are looking to the coach for answers. They're not trying to find their answers within themselves. So, it's kind of like the teaching someone how to fish versus handing them a fish. So I think, in a lot of situations where it starts to feel a little culty to me is where there's a power dynamic of the coach is the one who knows and the client's the one who does not know.
Right.
And the coach is going to bestow the knowledge on the client. And, it might be great knowledge. It might be something that kind of helps the client for a while. But I think in the end, it creates a dependence. And that's another hallmark of a cult is to create a dependence on the leader or the community.
Right. So creating dependence. What was the first one you said? It was
denying your autonomy.
Right. Denial of autonomy, creating what I know that, listen, I know you've done the research, so I got to ask, right? What's what is there, if I'm looking out, like if I'm doing a sniff test on is this wellness program, is this coach, is this, thing that I'm thinking that I want to do for my own benefit, is it am I at risk of doing, what are the things that I should look for?
Yeah. Well, any doctrine that tells you to ignore your own signals from your body or your own intuition.
Okay.
Any doctrine that bashes people you love. people who support you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that like there can be no critical analysis, but I'm saying like to the point where you're really feeling influenced to push people away that have been loved ones.
Right.
Black and white thinking.
Black and white
right
thinking.
and wrong. You know, because like what we were talking about earlier around like when you get cracked open and you're more vulnerable, it takes some certainty away. But what it brings is nuance. So what that means is I can have a relationship with you and have certain boundaries that are different than the relationship I have with another friend.
Right.
Because you guys are different people and it's different situationally, right? So each situation requires me to check in with myself,
right,
and find what works in our relationship, right? And I feel like in cult mentality, in coercive control, there's a lot of like apply this across the board with whoever, and so there's like no nuance. It's all black and white.
And that's sorry, go ahead.
And generally one person at the center.
There you
generally go. There's one person at the center.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a very, very rigid hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And a caveat I want to make is I haven't really studied this so much in terms of like Eastern religion, because I do think that there might be a difference in terms of like what a guru is versus what a cult leader is in the you know Western civilization. I don't want to speak for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, and it's interesting, and I know that I keep going back to business, right? Because that's kind of the context that I'm most familiar with. And yeah, like as you're talking, like tick, 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 there's, you know, I have experienced many or most of those things within the context of business. Thankfully, not all of them in the same place at the same time.
Right.
but you know, but a lot of them. And the other thing that I'm going to say too is from a leadership perspective, I've not only experienced them, I've practiced some of them. Like I'm going to own that, right? Like, and you know, people who've watched the show in the past know that like my experience as a leader has not been pristine in the past. Like I've learned an awful lot and changed an awful lot as I've gone along. But you know, leading by fear, for example, and black and white thinking, like those, absolutely, you know, and probably there are people who are watching this who are like, yeah, I know Todd is, I know when Todd's been like that. It's, you know, for sure.
Well, and you're a product of your culture, right? So I think that our culture at large values these things, like, oh, a decisive leader. Like, yes, I get that. And like, oftentimes the decisiveness is like at the expense of something.
Right.
You know, at
the or someone.
Looking at things from all angles.
Right.
But like what people see is that like, you know, someone like cracking the whip and being real decisive. And that's really lauded in our culture. And you know, I can't speak for corporate culture except for like, you know, I have a few corporate clients that I've, you know, coached with the lens of my like relational trauma training, because it's like, wow, you were bullied, you were manipulated, you were you were coercively controlled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is what's coming up for me as we're talking about this, right, is, you know, someone who is, let's say in business, who has experienced some of the things we're talking about from the perspective of their career, right? Whether it's where they work now or whether it's somewhere that they worked in the past, and is considering, you know, whether it's coaching or some other, you know, transformative wellness, you know, personal development type journey, but doesn't have experience with a cult in general, can look at the parts from the career that are like that and kind of go, oh, is that also what I'm going to get in this place? And do I want that? And do I want something different? Because the other thing that I know is true, like I haven't done the same trauma research and trauma training that you've done, but one of the things that I know is true is that often we are geared to accept that which is familiar rather than that which is healthy.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like it's, I hate it. It's terrible. It feels like crap, but I'm going to keep doing it because that's what I'm used to.
Sure.
And I know lots and lots and lots of people who do the same thing from a business perspective. And it's, I go from this job and this job isn't any good and it's bad for me because of black and white thinking, because of coercive control, whatever, and pop into another one that's exactly the same because that's what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And then you blame yourself.
And people in intimate relationships too.
Do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you blame yourself.
Right.
Oh, it must be something that I did wrong because it can't be systemic.
Right. Yeah. And that's another piece that I feel like is very inherent in a cult, is that like, if you're not moving up the hierarchy or, enlisting more people or like whatever the goal is, it's always your fault. There's never anything wrong with the system. Never. It's always some shortcoming in you. And where I see it a lot is in multi-level marketing. That is like prime example. People go to these seminars and they're like, I'm not succeeding. And so instead of helping them succeed, there's this whole, well, you're not doing it right.
Right.
You don't believe enough.
Right.
You don't believe in abundance.
Right.
whatever angle they can get to make it that person's fault.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting that you say that phrase too, right? You don't believe in abundance because, the abundance mindset is something that coaches talk about a lot. And it's not a bad thing.
No.
Right? It's not a bad thing. But it can be twisted and turned into, like, it can be weaponized.
Yeah, that was the word that came to my mind too.
Right? And turned into something
really weaponized.
Right. And turned into something ugly if the person saying it is trying to take advantage of an insecurity or a weakness or something like that. It's one of the so this is what's coming up. You and I both have trained extensively through coactive, and one of the hallmarks of the coactive model is that all people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And that can also be weaponized. It's actually the thing when it was the thing that I said to my sister when right, and I said, because the belief is that we're all naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and that was the trigger for her to go, have you tried to call? And well, it was really interesting because for me, what that did was like, okay, yeah, we're all naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. That's fantastic. Our expression of it can be wildly different. So my expression of my natural creativity, resourcefulness, and wholeness has nothing to do with your expression of your natural creativity, resourcefulness, and wholeness, right?
Yes.
And it's when we try to make it something other than that it becomes right. And abundance mindset is the same sort of thing. I love that you brought that up because there's so many things that could have, like, here's the light, useful side. And here's sort of the sinister application of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings something to my mind that I haven't really considered before, which is amazing on this topic because I got pretty vigilant about it. And that's that, like, I think a healthy, thriving ecosystem or community has a lot of diversity and celebrates a lot of uniqueness.
Yes.
Right. And in a coercive control situation, whether it's a relationship that's intimate or a business relationship or like a full-on self-development cult, they want a lot of uniformity, a lot
sameness
of
thought.
Yeah.
Right. Because diversity of thought is a challenge. It's a threat rather than something else. And I think that's I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And diversity of expression, not just thought, Oh. I watched Go ahead. I was just laughing. I watched a cult documentary on a church that was that, like, the thinner you were, the closer you were to God.
Oh my goodness.
So everybody is like anorexic.
Oh
Yeah.
no, that's terrible. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's that,
Yeah.
and obviously, like that's an extreme example. But at the same time, you can obviously see how it applies in lots
Mhm.
and lots of situations, right? So it's kind of like I think what's popping up for me, and maybe an important takeaway, because we're at that point where I'm going to start asking, well, what's the takeaway here? Like, what do we want people
Right.
to know?
Right.
But like the thing that's popping up for me is, cult itself isn't a black and white term. This is a cult. This isn't a cult. But there's qualities
Yes.
that you can look for that are kind of like, and it is kind of a sniff test. Like it's like sometimes the cheese has a little bit of mold and you can cut it away, and sometimes the cheese is just green, you got to throw it away.
Right.
And
Mhm.
there's
Right.
and there's a nuance. You said nuance before, and I think that's the thing, right? Like
Yeah.
exercise your own nuance, exercise what's important
Mhm.
here. I don't know what comes up for you. Like what do people need to walk away from this conversation with, Arjun?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Cult isn't necessarily a black and white term, but like there's
Hmm.
there's a spectrum, and
Hmm.
I've mentioned a lot of characteristics that would make
Yeah.
my feelers go up of like this is a little culty.
Hmm.
And even my favorite podcast on the subject is called A Little Bit Culty.
Oh, okay.
So
That's really
that's a
cool. I'm gonna listen
resource.
to that.
It's a great
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it's just important to, again, not be a black and white thinker.
Hmm.
And one other thing we didn't mention is I think what happens too a lot is it's things can be really culty around the core, and then
Hmm.
as someone who's kind of on the outer skirts of it, you might not see that.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
I think that's for me why I never kind of got swept up in any cult
Hmm.
mentality, is because I was always kind of on the outskirts of these things, like
Hmm.
through Kundalini yoga and through, maybe Landmark Forum. Like there's certain things about that
Right.
that are culty, right? But I didn't experience it that much because I wasn't in the center,
Right.
with the core people. So
Yeah.
there's also a place to stand sometimes. Like
Hmm.
there maybe is something to be gained if you're
Hmm.
a little farther out from center.
Hmm. Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is trust yourself first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Trust yourself first.
Right. And I think as coaches, that's our main mission, is
Absolutely.
to help people learn to trust themselves.
Hmm.
Because at every turn we're being told to second guess ourselves, and then we have that
Yeah.
voice in our head that
Hmm.
the critic or the gremlin or whatever people call it, that is
Hmm.
telling us not to trust ourselves and second
Yeah.
guessing ourselves. Yeah.
It's an important conversation.
Agreed.
Yeah. We could keep going, but we can't because it's time.
It's time.
Arjun, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for today. Listen, if folks want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to my website. It is arjanmakar.com.
Okay, and what we'll do is we'll make sure that that's in the show notes, both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And if everyone wants to get a hold of me, I'm at toddkarges.com. You know that already. I guess that's it. That's it for today. Yeah. Arjun, thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Yeah.
I
Thanks for having
I
me on.
appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you back.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to turn off the feed. Thank you,
bye.
everyone, for showing up, and we'll see you next time.